So, plant adaptations. Adaptations are the process of better adjusting with the environmental factors over the generations. These environmental factors can be availability of water, temperature conditions, light conditions, and the nutrient availability. The category of adaptations can be structural adaptations, physiological adaptations, or reproductive adaptations. So we look at different adaptations that plants undergo for different environmental factors and what are the different kinds of adaptations they perform. First type of adaptation is the adaptation to water availability. The plants that grow in the area with little amount of water or almost desert-like conditions are called xerophytes. These xerophytes are present in deserts or areas with limited water. What kind of adaptation they have? They may have very thick or wax-like cuticle on their surface to reduce the loss of water by evaporation, for example in cactus. They have sunken stomata, and in the last lecture we saw that stomata are the openings on the surface of leaf from the gas exchange happening. Thus, the stomata which are sunken can trap moist air inside them, thus helping with the dry environmental conditions. Reducing the number of leaves, because on the leaves there is a lot of water loss happening. That's why the size of leaves is reduced to spines. For example, here you can see that the leaves are reduced to spines to reduce the loss of water. Water storage can occur, for example, in some succulent plants like aloe and cacti, because this water can be utilized for other life processes by plants. Xerophytes also tend to have very elaborate root system. Their roots go deep into the ground to utilize more underground water. Another adaptation to water can be when the water is much in abundance, for example in the aquatic conditions. The plants that grow in aquatic conditions are called hydrophytes. So what adaptations in the body are required for the plants that are growing in water? They have reduced or almost absent cuticles. They don't need to prevent the loss of water. They have air-filled tissues which keep them floating on the surface of water and helps in gas exchange, for example what you're seeing here. They have floating leaves which are broad that helps them in floating on the surface of water. They also have very flexible stem and leaves so that they don't break under the current of water. The plants which grow in moderate water condition are called the mesophytes. The mesophytes have sufficient water around them and they are present in areas like temperate forest. The key adaptations are that they have very moderate root system which is just enough developed to survive their conditions, and they also have normal size of their leaves with thin cuticle and just the right amount of stomata and well-defined vascular system. Now let's look at some adaptations to the light availability. The plants that grow in shade-tolerant conditions are called the xerophytes. These plants are found under the forest canopies and in the shade areas. The main adaptations are large and broad leaves, which increases the surface area to capture maximum amount of light that is available, because they do not have much exposure to light. They are growing in shade. They should also have enough chlorophyll to maximize the absorption of light to perform the process of photosynthesis. They also have low growth rate because they want to conserve the energy, because there is only a limited amount of light present and they can only perform a limited amount of photosynthesis. Another adaptation to light condition is the heliophyte plants. Heliophyte plants are the sun-loving plants. They are found in open areas with direct sunlight. They usually have very thick and small leaves because they want to reduce the water loss as they are present in the exposed sunlight, and they also want to resist the damage due to sunlight. They also have high levels of protective pigments which defend them from the harmful effect of UV rays of light. These plants can grow rapidly because they have enough photosynthesis, production of energy to perform various life functions. Next are the adaptations to extreme temperature conditions. So one extreme condition is very cold temperature. Plants that grow in cold areas are called the cryophytes. They are found in Arctic, alpine, or the temperate environments. What are the adaptations in these plants? They have antifreeze proteins. They have such proteins which can prevent crystallization in extremely cold environment. They have very small needle-like leaves because they want to reduce the loss of water and they want to prevent the freezing damage. They also undergo perennial dormancy because they want to perform minimal life functions when the conditions are extremely cold. These plants also have very dark green leaves because they want to maximize the amount of conversion of light energy into chemical energy. Therefore, they have a lot of chlorophyll. Another harsh condition associated with temperature can be high heat condition. The high heat tolerant plants are found in hot deserts or tropical environment. Their adaptations are they tend to fold or roll their leaves, again that is to reduce the exposure to sun. They also want to keep themselves cool, that's why they perform a lot of transpiration, which is the evaporation of water from their leaf surface. These plants are usually the CAM photosynthesis plants because they keep their stomata open during the night and they perform most of the gas exchange at night because they want to prevent the loss of water. Now let's look at the adaptations that plants do in relation to the availability of nutrients. The plants that are growing in the nutrient poor soil sometimes end up being carnivorous because they don't have enough nutrients around them. So the example of carnivorous plants is the insect trapping mechanism. As you can see here, that the leaves of these plants can trap the insects, and these insects are used as the main nitrogen source. Example are the Venus flytrap or the pitcher plant. These plants have modified leaves which develop a structure for trapping their prey or the insects. For example, here you can see that they have created a trapdoor to trap the insects inside the pitcher. Another adaptation in nutrient poor soil is the development of mycorrhizal association. So mycorrhizal association is an association or a symbiotic relationship of plant roots with fungi. Fungi provides absorbable nutrients to the roots, especially phosphorus from the soil, and in return the roots provide shelter to these fungi. These plants also have extensive root system because they want to increase their surface area for absorption of nutrients and water. Some special adaptations can be epiphytes. Epiphytes are the plants which grow on other plants. They are found in tropical rainforest and they grow on the tree trunk or branches. The main features of these plants are that they are non-parasitic. They do not take nutrients from their host, but they only obtain moisture and air and a place for living on the other plant. They also have modified root system which help them absorb moisture from the environment instead of obtaining moisture from soil or their host plant. They also have water storage system which help them in storing the water inside their own tissues. Halophytes are the plants which are adapted to salty soil conditions or the salty environmental conditions. They are found in coastal areas or in salt marshes. To deal with the excessive salt, they have developed the salt excretion mechanism, and they excrete salt through the glands present on their leaves. Succulent tissue also help these plants in storing water and diluting the concentration of salt inside them. The roots of such plant selectively absorb certain ions which are helpful for them, and they prevent the absorption of harmful salts. The third category of adaptations are related to the reproductive behavior. For example, seed dormancy. Some plants can undergo seed dormancy when they are present in some unfavorable conditions. So they want to delay the germination, they want to protect their seed, and they delay the germination until they have some favorable environmental conditions. Another example of reproductive adaptation is pollination, in which the plants use certain strategies to maximize the pollination. For example, if the pollination has to be performed by wind, the flowers would be very insignificant, or they would not be very big, and they will have very lightweight pollen so that pollen can fly with the wind. For animal adaptations, the flower would be more elaborate, colorful, fragrant, and they will be there to attract insects like bees or insect birds and bats, so that they can pick up their pollen and put on another plant. Another kind of survival mechanism is the dispersal mechanism. If the plant wants to disperse its flower with the help of wind, they tend to have very lightweight seeds or flowers, and if they want their seeds to be dispersed by animals, then they would have very attractive fruits so that plants can present their fruit to the animals, and in that process the animals eat the fruit, and wherever they defecate they would excrete the seeds, and that's how they will be able to spread the seeds of that plant all over. Till now we have studied how the plants have developed several strategies for adapting to the environment they are growing in. But what happens when they receive a stimulus from outside? How do they respond to those stimuli? So the response to stimulus is important for survival and for thriving in a certain situation. These stimuli responses can be mainly of two types. Tropic movement, in which the plant tend to have some growth movements towards or away from the stimulus, or the nastic movement, in which there is no direction involved in the response of these plants. Plants do not have a nervous system, they can only respond to the chemical or physical changes when they receive a stimulus. So depending on the kind of stimulus they receive, they have different kinds of responses. So what are the categories of stimulus that a plant receives? It can be in the form of light, in the form of gravity, touch, water, or some chemicals. Phototropism is the growth of plant in response to light. Photopositive phototropism is the growth of plant toward the source of light, and the negative phototropism would be growing away from light. For example, here you can see that the shoot system tends to grow towards light, and the root system tends to grow away from light. What is the mechanism involved? There is a hormone called auxin which accumulates in the shaded side of the plant that promotes the growth and elongation of cells. So because the growth and elongation is promoted on the shaded side, the plant would seem to be bending towards the light source. Geotropism is the growth of plant in response to gravity. Positive geotropism would be in the direction of gravity and negative geotropism would be against the direction of gravity. For example, here you can see that the plant shoot grows against gravity and plant root grows towards gravity. So what is the mechanism of geotropism? There are starch-filled organelles called statoliths which accumulate in the response to gravity. They signal the accumulation of auxin. Auxin leads to the inhibition of cell elongation on the lower side, thus leading to an overall growth of the shoot downwards. While in the shoot, auxin leads to the cell elongation on the lower side, thus leading to the upward direction of growth of the shoot. Thigmotropism is the directional growth of a plant in response to touch and physical contact. The example of thigmotropism are climbing plants like vines and tendrils which wrap around the object to obtain support. What is the mechanism of thigmotropism? Calcium ions and ethylene play important role in the signaling for promotion of cell growth in the response to the presence of these supports. Upon contact with such supports, the local growth is stimulated or inhibited to allow the plant to secure itself around the support. Hydrotropism is the growth of plant root toward a water source. The mechanism is the water molecule in the soil signal the direction of growth. There is an important hormone called abscisic acid in plants which is involved in the growth of roots in the direction of water source. Chemotropism is the growth in response to the chemical signal. Such kind of growth is seen when a pollen sits on the ovule of a flower. That time the pollen tube grows in response to the chemical signals produced by the ovule. This leads to the fertilization of male and female gametes in the plants and thus the production of seeds. The mechanism involved is the chemical gradient created by the sugar or amino acids guides the growth of certain plant parts, for example here the pollen tube, towards the direction of nutrient-rich environment. Nastic movements are non-directional responses to the stimuli. Let's see some examples. Thigmonasty is the movement in response to touch. For example, here you can see when Mimosa pudica plant is touched, it tends to fold its leaves in response to touch. Photonasty is the movement in response to light, as we have seen the opening and closing of sunflower flowers. Another kind of nastic movement is the nyctinasty movement, which is in response to the day and night cycle, the diurnal cycle. Such movement we have seen in some certain plants which closes during the night and then they open during the sunlight. Now let's look at the hormonal control in plant responses. There are several hormones that regulate plant response to stimuli. For example, gibberellin is a hormone that promotes the stem elongation and germination in plants. Then auxin is another hormone that promotes cell elongation, particularly in response to phototropism or geotropism. Cytokinin is a hormone which stimulates cell division and shoot formation. Ethylene is involved in the ripening of fruits and stress responses like thigmotropism. And abscisic acid inhibits the growth and promotes dormancy in plants to help them survive drought conditions. To understand hormonal response further, let's take the example of two important hormones of plant: auxin, which is released in response to light, and abscisic acid, which is released in response to drought conditions. Now, there are several factors. For example, we'll have the example of some abiotic stress factors. Abiotic means non-living stress factors such as drought, heat, or cold. When the plant receives such stimuli, it closes its stomata in the drought condition to conserve water. That is the effect of abscisic acid. Some responses like the abiotic factors such as the presence of herbivorous animals or the attack of pathogens, the plants can produce some metabolites which can be toxic in nature to prevent the attack of herbivorous animals or some insects that can try to eat the plant parts, and this response can occur in under the control of the hormone such as auxin. Thus, to conclude, the plants are highly adaptive to their environment. They respond to various kinds of external stimuli despite not having a nervous system. Responses and adaptations help the plant to have an optimal growth, reproduction, and ensure their survival. These responses and adaptations also help in utilizing the resources, and these adaptations also help in protecting plants from stressful environmental conditions.